Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us this evening. It's our great good fortune that we are able to publish a second book by Vikram in 2 years. This one we weren't expecting. A colleague of mine, Renuka, she read, I think, an interview or something where Vikram had said that, as part of Suitable Girl, he was working on this. He actually translated the Hanuman Chalisa, and then we got in touch, and here is the book. It's a glorious translation of this, one of the most beloved. I call it a hymn. He corrects me each time I do that. Hymn, devotional poem, long poem, just a poem of world literature. And when I read it, of course, this is a translation by a poet. And Vikram identifies as a writer, primarily as a poet. And then he says, I've also written novels. This is a translation, as I said, by a poet. And so I was, of course, expecting it to be brilliant. But what really delighted, surprised me and my colleagues who read it was that it has that magical, mesmerizing, incantatory quality of the Hanuman Chalisa. And you would think English wouldn't allow for that, but that's the magic of the translation. And you will hear about that because it was a great education for me to hear him talk about falling rhythms, trochaic, and about the process of translating it in metre and in rhyme. And in his introduction, he also talks, which to me really, and to many of us is really significant, is how it's important to claim something like this, which is a great work of literature, and to rescue it from religious chauvinism. It's really Vikram that you should be listening to. So I'm going to request Vikram and Mandira to come up. Mandira will be in conversation with Vikram. Mandira, many of us know of her as a journalist, a veteran journalist. She was with The Week for a very, very long time. And now she's working on her own book, which we hope to read soon.
Okay. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mandira.
And
thank you, Patel.
Thank you, Patel. Thank you for coming.
Speaking.
Thank you, Speaking Tajika, for actually persuading you to let them have this translation after 10 years, right?
It was partly them, and it was partly Usha Mami, my 90-year-old old aunt who lives on the ground floor, whom, of course, I showed my translation to. And she said, Beta, you've got to share it with other people, not just with me. So I said, but it's a private translation. I did it 10 years ago. I read it once at, I think, a literary festival. But after that, I didn't touch it. And so first I hand wrote it for her. And then she said, well, get it published. And then Om and Ravi and gang, Renuka and so on, decided to publish it. Very nice.
So, I was just saying that the translation, I think Ravi also talked about it. I think it does have this quality. I think there is this, you talk about it being a beloved poem. And I think you start off with talking about it and Bhaskar. And you said Bhaskar learnt it from Suitable Boy, learnt it when he was 5. And then he also liked being part of the Ram Leela.
Bhaskar is a character in a Suitable Boy who, at the age of 9 or something, he was very young. He takes part in the Ram Leela, the annual Ram Leela in Brahmpur, the city where Suitable Boy is set. He's a very precocious young mathematician, but he's also a naughty kid, and he enjoys this kind of stuff. But sorry, to just back.
You say you dedicated it because in some ways Bhaskar is, he learnt it, and it sort of talks about how you are handed down the Hanuman Chalisa. And I'm glad you mentioned this and talking about Usha Mami, because at some level, while it is a beloved poem, which we sort of has inhabited our everydays, it's sort of a lived experience, it's something that we've all heard. There's a personal memory, right? It's not something you just encounter in a book, right?
No, I think so. I mean, actually, if you really think of it, I mean, I can't think of, maybe someone in the audience could correct me, any other poem in the world which is known and recited and loved by so many people. Like, I think there's a 4-line Chinese poem about homesickness, where you look at the moon and you think of your home village. It's 4 lines long. And then there's, of course, Happy Birthday to You, which is fairly well known. And yesterday was my birthday. But I said, I'm not
Happy birthday.
Do you want to try? Okay, that's fine.
So maybe after
I wanted to spend it with Usha Mami and with Aradhana. So I said, you can have this thing on the 19th or the 21st. But so anyway, apart from these two poems, I mean, I really can't think of anything that's as well known by so many tens of millions of people by heart. And this is not a 4-line poem. This is an 86-line poem.
Yeah.
There's a Chalisa times 2, which is 80, and then 3 dohas of 6 lines. So it's a long poem.
Yeah. So how was it handed down to you? I mean, what are your memories of it? Because it is personal, right? And
It's personal, but I mean, I really don't know. I mean, I came across it partly because, it's all around all the time. And secondly, because I suppose, just like I created Bhaskar gave it to me.
Yeah.
So I had to learn the things that my characters were steeped in.
yeah.
But A Suitable Boy was written 30 years ago. And so it's been with me ever since then. I think it's true of your characters. Your characters, for example, the number of Muslim characters in A Suitable Boy. So then I decided I had to learn Urdu properly.
Yeah.
I had to learn, Mir and Ghalib, because otherwise how can you understand the world of your characters?
Yeah.
Similarly with an equal music, if you don't understand something about the violin and how it's played, or the basic structure of it, how on earth can you write from the inside, or even claim to write from the inside about a musician? And whether it's a religious thing or a linguistic thing or a thing based on music or art, to understand your characters, I think you need to partake of their world. But this is taking us very far afield from the Hanuman Chalisa.
But so, we're not going to do happy birthday to you. I mean, I think we'll do that at the
Maybe
end.
at the end.
At the end. But we were going to ask you to recite some of the Hanuman Chalisa, your favorite bit.
There's no favorite bit.
Well, you start in.
Well, why don't you begin a line? I'll continue it.
No, why don't you begin?
That's all.
Okay, because
the usual order.
I'm going to have to fish out my glass.
Okay, the Hanuman Chalisa, all of you know it, but still, it starts with the 2 dohas. And the doha has a different rhythm from the main body of the text, which is in chaupais. And then at the end, by way of coda, by way of a little tail at the end, there is one final doha. So let me just read the dohas. At some stage, I'll read the chaupais or introduce them into the text. But the dohas, Shri Guru Charan Saroj, let's just see what the translation is. Shri Guru Charan Saroj Raj Nijmanu Mukhru Sadhari Barno Raghuvar Vimala Jasu Jodaku Halachari. Okay. Having cleansed with the dust of my teacher's feet the mirror of my mind and being, I sing of Ram from whom all things come. Truth means desire and freeing. Those are the 4. Halachari. Buddhiheen Tanujan ke Sumara Pavana Kumar Bara Buddhi Vidya Dehu Mohe Arahu Kalesa Bikar. Knowing how shallow my learning is, to you, Hanuman, I pray. Grant to me wisdom, knowledge, and strength. Take every blemish away. Then, Jai Hanuman, Jnana Gun Sagar, Jai Kapi Sate Unlok Ujagar. Hail Hanuman, great wisdom's ocean. The 3 worlds glow with your light and devotion. Envoy of Ram and mightiness towering, Anjani's son and the winds overpowering. Ramaduta Atulita Baladhama, Anjani Putra Pavan Satanava. So it goes on like that. I mean, I'm trying to get that falling rhythm. Now, what is a falling rhythm? English tends to be in a rising rhythm. It tends to go ta-tum, 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 ta-tum. Like, I'm speaking now to an audience in the park, okay? Ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. But in the Chalisa, you'll find the rhythm is a falling rhythm. It isn't. It's Jai Hanuman. Yeah, it's the first beat is stressed. Like table and able are the rhymes that you find Balbira or Pira, as opposed to stool and tool or something like that, which is stressed on the last syllable. Now, English is a bit rare in rhymes like that. So I found, well, I hope I haven't taken too many liberties with Tulsi Das's text, but I thought it was worth something of a compromise to get that feeling of the poem, which otherwise, if it's translated into pure prose, you don't understand why it has such a magical hold on so
Exactly.
many people.
Yeah, yeah.
Why it consoles them in times of distress or when they're in need of courage, or it's just
Yeah.
something. Some people recite, the 23rd Psalm,
Yeah.
or the
Yeah.
Lord's Prayer or something if they're
Yeah.
Christian, or they might recite whatever it is, the Kalam. It's something that, whether you're a believer or whether you're a half believer, whether it's Ardha Vishwas or even Andha Vishwas,
Yeah.
it can somehow affect you and move you.
Also, I think in some ways, and in the introduction, you talk about how you wanted to add stories, and you also wanted to add the history of it, right? Or of Tulsidas and why it was so beloved to Tulsidas himself. But I also think, and you talked about rhythm, and I wanted to ask you as a poet, let me see, at this point of time when we, it became, of course, whether it's a hymn or whether it is the Chalisa, you sort of had everyday rhythm and everyday rhyme, this thing in our lives. This thing, when you
Yeah.
look at the suitable boy, you talk about learning Urdu and Mir and Dalib, that, that particular time, and this thing where everyday life had a certain, certain poetry. It was everyday poetry in a way, right?
Vandana, is your question, why didn't I add the notes?
No. I will come back to why didn't I add the notes. But my question is that how do you see the fact that there was everyday poetry in a particular time in our lives, and how do you look at now, where you think that there is, where we sort of moved away? It's not only about reclaiming the text for a more pluralist understanding of it, but it's also reclaiming it for its beauty, for its rhythm, for its... and how do you feel about that, about everyday poetry then and now?
It brings up quite a number of subjects, including the one that Ravi referred to. Actually, I find it quite difficult to latch onto a question. Ask me a question in one sentence.
Okay, so how do you think, do you think we used to have everyday poetry, we used to recite this a lot.
Okay.
People still sing, and do you think that we've moved away?
No, not really, not particularly. I mean, people now sing, film songs, or at least at one stage they did when film songs were better than they are now. Or people, there's a new craze for
Instead of poetry.
Poetry. There's rap poetry. There's all sorts of poetry in our lives. Poetry is something so basic. I mean, children are sung to sleep from their childhood to lullabies, and or they sing themselves. Shamami mentioned to me that she recites it twice before going to sleep.
Yeah,
That's very interesting. The whole of the Hanuman Chalisa, interesting that she does that. And it's funny that you discover things about your beloved aunt after knowing them for 90 years, or knowing her for 60 or 70. I shouldn't get ahead of myself. Someone once asked me, do you believe in reincarnation? And I said, no, I don't, but I used to in a past life. And they... enough of these Trumpian asides. As far as the other question about claiming it or reclaiming it or something, with your permission, I'll just read a couple of things in the introduction. I do mention this question of not adding a whole heavy apparatus of notes and explaining who Sugriv was and who, why is Janaki, why is Sita called Janaki, all this stuff. I thought, just leave the text. People can always
go
Googla sakte hain na? You can leave.
I like that, Googla
sakte. I think we can invent our own verbs.
Yeah, the verbs, right.
Yeah. Use jugaad, I use googlana.
I think googlana is much nicer.
Now these are the relevant paragraphs. It's at the end of a short introduction. It just says, well, actually, I'll read a few things around. Okay. I talked about Tulsidas' text and what liberties I might have had to take. I say another constraint should be mentioned. It was not possible to recreate the wonderfully musical echoes and alliterations of the original. Alliteration like, anyway, such as the repeated nasal vowels of the 23rd Chaupai, or the repeated retroflex sounds of the 30th. Sankatakate mete savapeet. That thing, you can't do it in English. We only have one T. A th and a t doesn't exist. So at any rate, all this is just a means, however imperfect, of acquainting or reacquainting people with the magical and joyful work impressed in the memories and affections of millions, which encapsulates a whole culture in fewer than 90 lines. I dedicate this translation to Bhaskar, who learnt the poem before he was 5, but who spent his 50s fighting the chauvinism and intolerance to which this and many other well-beloved religious texts and rituals have been put. Nothing could be further from the humanity and inclusivity of the best of Hinduism than the self-aggrandizement and willful cruelty of those who use the religion in which, in the lottery of life, they happen to be born, in order to attack or demean others. May the Hanuman Chalisa continue to spread joy, expand imagination, and give strength and solace to its many past and future readers.
I like that. And I think that we talked about reincarnation. And I wanted to ask you, in some ways, that the Hanuman Chalisa and Tulsi Das's beloved poem also has a reincarnation story about Hanuman being the first person. Do you know it, and would you want to talk about that?
I know, but I mean, there's so many Hanuman myths. I mean, even when you say whether he was a Pavanasutta or there was an Anjaneya, who was he born with? Was he Bhim's half-brother? Because
exactly.
were the sons of, Vayu or whatever. So these are things that spread around over 2,000 years. They spread around any kind of myth, whether it's a Norse myth or a Hindu myth or a Greek myth. There's so many different variants of that. But certainly, if you'd like to mention it.
The story goes that there is, the Valmiki Ramayana and there's the Tulsi Das Ramayana, right? So the story goes that Valmiki was writing the Ramayana, and actually Hanuman is the first teller of the Ramayana. He's the one who goes to Sita when she's in the Ashok Vatika and tells the story, and he also tells the story in Awadhi. He's also the one who lives beyond the Ramayana, supposedly on earth. And the story goes that Sita has been banished. That's what's happened in Valmiki. Tulsidas glosses over this, apparently. And he's sort of very tearful, and he goes up to a mountain and writes the Ramayana. And then Valmiki comes, who's also written the Ramayana, and he meets Hanuman and says, I believe you've written the Ramayana too. So Hanuman sort of picks him up and takes him up to this mountain where he's sort of etched out this Ramayana. Valmiki is weeping because it's so beautiful. And then he tells him that, yours is so beautiful and it's so deeply felt, who will ever read mine? And Hanuman says, I didn't think of that. So he goes and he sort of destroys that Ramayana. And Valmiki says that in my next life, I will do a poem and I will be reborn. And I will then do a poem I will basically make you the hero of this story. And this is why, so he gets reborn apparently as Tulsi Das, and this is how the Hanuman Chalisa comes in, because it's actually a much later text, this whole idea of Hanuman, this whole thing.
Yeah, Hanuman, the sort of sacred, the treatment of Hanuman has changed a great deal over the centuries, and really from about 1000 or so. The 1000 in the Christian era, or the standard era, you can call it, that Hanuman worship increased so greatly. Actually, he doesn't, although we mentioned Bhim as his half-brother, in a sense, because both of them are sons of the wind god, he doesn't appear in the Mahabharata except once or maybe twice or something. There's this story of Bhim trying to go further and not being able to, and finds an aged monkey and can't even move his tail, and then he's revealed as Hanuman. But it's interesting also. Hanuman is one of those self-aggrandizing people. Normally, he doesn't. He's in the worship of something or someone else. That's quite a nice thing.
So I thought that since we talked about reincarnation, I thought that was an interesting thing. Would you want to read a little more?
Sure. Well, one of the things about the notes, I was coming in the car just now and I was looking at it and I thought, why didn't I mention something that I've found quite interesting that if you divide the Hanuman Chalisa into 4 parts, from the 1st to the 10th, 11th to the 20th, and 21st, and so on, you find that one quarter begins with the sort of Hanuman Chopal, and the second one begins with Lakshman, then Ram, and then Sita.
Yeah.
So the first couplet is Jai Hanuman Gyana Gunda Sagar Jai Kapis Te Lok Jagar. Then the 11th one is Lai Sajeevan Lakhal Jai Shri Raghubir Harashi Uralai. So that's Lakshman. The third one is Ram Dware Tum Rakhware Potna Yazin Par Pesar. And the fourth one is Ashta Siddhino Nidhi Ke Data Nasabaradeen Janaki Mata.
Yeah.
So it's quite curious. I mean, I have quite a lot to write about, but I just didn't want to stuff a translation with all these thoughts. Maybe at some time I'll write an essay about my acquaintance or reacquaintance with it.
Yeah.
In a personal way. But all these things, as you reacquaint yourself with the text, you suddenly realize how interesting it is structurally.
Yeah.
Sorry, I must look at that structurally as well as in terms of its incantatory, mesmeric rhythm
Yeah.
and rhyme. So for those guests of mine, I mentioned that it's the 11th, the first 11th, 21st, and 31st chopais are translated as such. The first one is to Hanuman. Hail Hanuman, hail Hanuman, great wisdom's ocean. The 3 worlds glow with your light and devotion. The 11th one, which is where he gets the magic herb to cure Lakshman, but doesn't know which herb it is, so brings the whole mountain along. You brought the herb that was Lakshman's salvation. Ram pressed you close to his heart with elation. Praising your virtues one after another, you are as dear as his Bharat, my brother. The 21st is the one which is where he stands sentry outside Ram's door. So the third is Ram. Ram's door, it is you who stand sentry. No one without your permission gains entry. And the fourth one is Ashtasiddhi. 31. 9 great gifts, 8 yogic powers, grant us the boons that Sita showers. So somehow you have to try in some translation. You sort of try to dance within chains. And so my feeling is that even if 10% of the pleasure of the poem is remitted to the audience, that's good enough. After all, I myself am a huge beneficiary of translations. I wouldn't be sitting here if it hadn't been for a translation of Pushkin's great poem, Eugene Onegin, which made me write The Golden Gate. I borrowed the stanza form. In fact, as I was coming from Noida, we passed by Firoz Shah Road and the Lalit Kala Academy where there's a statue of Pushkin. So I just like, maybe to Hanuman, it's to Hanuman. Pushkin is my sort of, you could say, my muse.
Yeah. So I think there'll be plenty of people who want to open up for the audience. So do you think you can have some conversation? I don't want to.
Should we
Sorry.
should we pass the mic down?
Yeah, we should. Because,
Sanjay, वो दूसरा जो microphone है.
Does anybody have any questions? I don't want to hog him.
I'm not hoggable.
And then, of course, we have to sing happy birthday.
That's nice.
What would really be lovely is if you could sing it.
I don't think so. My voice is so besara that I don't think you'd like to hear it. Frankly,
It is.
Come on, let's have a try.
There's absolutely
No, you should. Actually, you should.
I shan't. I can't. I won't.
Aradhana is saying that you can sing really well.
Aradhana,
Is that just sibling pride?
No, not at all. I tell you why he's very straightforward about it.
Of course.
Forget it. I'm listening very carefully, but there's absolutely no way I will do that. Okay. When I have my Tanpura.
Now you get a Tanpura app. I'm sure we can sort of download. Yeah.
Privately for you, sir. I'll sing it.
Privately. So can I ask, you talk about Bhaskar 50 years late,
Yeah.
about 35 years later, right? And him battling this. So in the next bit, of course, I'm not asking you to reveal what happens. See, how much of the research and how much have you done where Bhaskar is battling this thing? How far has Bhaskar come now in modern day India?
Well, you consider that a suitable girl is set from 2010 to 2014.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so a suitable boy was set in the early 50s.
Yes.
Basically 60-year gap.
Yeah.
So the boy who's 60, who is 8 years old, is now 68 years old. He's a sort of emeritus professor of maths and physics or something like that. And but he also has a literary bent.
Yeah.
And in his 50s, so that would have been in one of the earlier novellas.
Yeah.
There's a lot of this intolerance and stuff that comes around. And Bhaskar has already made a name for himself, so he feels that he should take a little time off from his researches. He translates the Hanuman Chalisa for his own pleasure. There's a slight aspect of an alter ego.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I also want to ask you, if we've talked about the politics and reclaiming it, but there's also a shift, and I wanted to ask you, what do you see? I mean, it is not only intolerant. It's not only the rise of majoritarianism,
Correct.
but there is a certain aspect. They say that Hanuman is the god of the Kali Yuga, right? That's
Yeah.
he's- that is
arguable. Yeah.
that is one interpretation. So when you open you have this wonderful picture of Hanuman, which is of him with holding the mountain. Now, but do you look at that and you look at the imagery that you have now, where when we grew up, when say the 50s, you had Hanuman was always Ram was always with family,
And quite
Say
often
Babak.
it does.
Yeah. And you had
Yeah.
Hanuman at his
We
feet.
say Hriday Basavu. In fact, in his case, it actually
Is
okay.
right. So can you talk really about the change and why do you think that the changes happen where Hanuman moves from being this at the feet of Lord Ram to now this very muscular,
Well, it's obviously it's quite largely it's a political thing.
Yeah.
People in any adversarial political culture, where there are elections and so on, do try to create divisions among people. There are lots of other deeper sociological reasons as well. But this is the thing that creates the most mischief, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, if you see, for example, the whole business of why the Babri Masjid came about and why before that the Mandal thing came about and before that what else was open. I mean, if you go back, it's not quite like a domino theory, but you can see causality going further back. And naturally, with something like the Ayodhya thing, and of course there's a very strange irony about what's happened in Ayodhya recently in the elections.
Yeah.
You can say that it is quite largely not born of bhakti so much as of trying to pit one Indian against another for electoral advantage, power. That's basically it. And so then they tend to use the aspects of Hanuman, which are not the bhakti aspects, not the sukshma rupa dhari se hi dikhawa,
Yeah.
but the vikata rupa re lanka jarawa type of thing, and destroy things. Now, in my particular case, I was going to publish it on Hanuman Jayanti, which is Chaith Purnima.
Yeah.
But then I thought to myself, oh my God, if I do that, it'll get sucked into this whole electoral business. And they'll think that, God knows, this chap has gone over to the dark side or something. He's become a kind of Bajrang Dali or something like that. And so then I thought, okay, well, let's do it afterwards.
Yeah.
And in a way, by doing it afterwards, it became a much more beautiful book because you could take time over it. And the designers also deserve a lot of credit for the way the books come out.
Yeah.
And I also forgot to mention a suitable agency.
Yes, of
who's
course.
helped here a great deal as well.
Yeah.
So I don't think the problem is over yet. I mean, people seem to be so afraid of people speaking their minds or being free thinking. I mean, look what's happening to Arundhati, for example, now. Craziness. I mean, I do think that we live in a better situation now than we lived a month ago. Because there is, if as was said, that was a trailer to what was going to come, at least now there is, I would say, some sort of limitation on autocracy, some sort. That's, I'm balanced, so to speak, by N and N on either side. What the heck is that?
You.
Wanting me not to speak about politics.
Well, saved by the bell.
How do I say? It's gone off. Who are both of them, N and Naidu and Nitish, are fairly secular. So let's see what happens. After all, in the NDA, the first NDA government, where they had Samtadal and George Fernandez, who was not just secular but a Christian. So I think there was a kind of limitation on the mischief that could be created by setting one Indian against another, which I consider about the worst thing you can do to weaken your country. And it's just simply wrong. I mean, every citizen is an equal citizen.
But there's also this aspect of moving away, and it's the same question that I asked you, about poetry and everyday living. But there is an aspect, while it is a really simple poem, right? It's also about abstract ideas. So you're looking at Hanuman in, you're looking at Hinduism, which was sort of very eclectic and very this thing, and you sort of absorb this as an everyday lived experience, right? And you think in some ways we're also moving away from the just how mind-bending Hinduism is in a way.
Well, I mean, look at Hanuman himself. I mean, I say the Hanuman Chalisa is a hymn to Hanuman in his many mythic roles.
Yeah.
Warrior, protector, remover of obstacles, teacher, devotee, advisor, scribe, as you said, or creator, bestower of good things, intercessor, friend, miracle worker, God. And God is put in small letters at the end.
Yeah.
And also, have you thought animal?
Yes.
I mean, when you think of our most beloved, some of like Ganeshji or Hanumanji, or it is many of the avatars of Vishnu or Narasimha avatar, and all the Vahans that we have, all the way from Skand or Saraswati's peacock, all the way to the white owl of Lakshmi. Incredible.
Yeah.
So you're right. It is mind-bending in that sense, in that the whole of creation is somehow brought in.
Yeah.
Trees that we worship, rivers that we worship. So, and even if you're not a worshipper as such, you just feel at home in your geography. So yes, and that's why I said, I mean, you can't say Hinduism is a tolerant religion, because sometimes it takes a Vikata roop.
Yes.
And can you say Buddhism, which is supposed to be very tolerant? See what's happening in Sri Lanka, see what's happening in Myanmar.
Yeah.
So it is the personnel who inhabit the religion that actually quite often shape what the heck is going on in that religion. You might say, well, look at the time of Arab learning and so on, how tolerant Islam was. But then Islam changed in many ways, or parts of it did. And why? Partly because Christianity changed and forced crusades and created a kind of... So all this stuff is so bound up with history. Eventually, institutions, and religion is a kind of institution. Institutions are decided, their ethos, their feeling is decided by the people who are in them. And how humane and how logical, and whether or not they apply humane logic. Even if they don't apply affection, at least apply humane logic. You have to see that life is a lottery. You could have been born as someone else. A different religion, a different gender, a different language. You might not have been born a human at all.
Exactly.
Or born at all.
Yeah, true. So my last question, how do you reclaim?
I mean, it's always been ours. It's not even been filched. It's been co-opted by someone else. And I don't see, I mean, I was cautious, as I said, when I published it and so on. Because I'm not an idiot. I know what, like the danger of publishing things at certain times and letting them influence events. But I don't see why we cannot claim not just all Hinduism, but why we cannot claim all human cultures. In India, we're so lucky. We have the Islamic culture, we have the Hindu culture, we have the Judeo-Christian culture.
You have this Sikh culture.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have, but I'm saying the most populous cultures, for example, take the Sino-Japanese, Tibetan, Korean culture, we don't have that. But that also belongs to us if we choose to learn it or to understand it. We really are impoverishing ourselves if we in any sense deprive ourselves of this. Though, of course, the one universal hymn which we could end is the one that's known to everyone, the Happy Birthday hymn.